My name is Nicola Kefalianos, a Gen Z uni student wanting to get onto the impossible feeling property ladder, and this is my dad, John. He's a mortgage broker and a property developer. Today, we're going to be talking about calling off around the country.
Thank you, Nicola. That's right. So today's episode, we're going to go through what calling off actually is. Do you actually know, Nicola, what calling off rights are?
I've heard a little bit about it. When you're buying a property, you have a bit of a period to pull out of the contract. Is that correct?
Correct, yep. So every state is very different, and we're going to go through each state and go through what calling off actually looks like and the differences between each state as well.
So let's start by starting with New South Wales.
Yes, so in New South Wales, for example, you have calling off period of 5 business days. So what that means is
quite long.
You have you sign a contract today, the offer is accepted by the vendor, you've got 5 days to call off and walk away from that contract. But there is a bit of a clause to that you've got to be aware of. So there is a fee that you will need to pay, and that's 0.25% of the contract price. So, for example, if you're buying a house for, say, $700,000, the fee that you're going to pay to walk away is $1,750. So it is a time. It's in place to protect you as a buyer, and the government's probably done it to protect you as a buyer in case you do change your mind or something does happen and you can't buy that property.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you do have to pay a fee if you do walk away. So the reason why there's this fee of 0.25% in some states, it stops people making or signing contracts on multiple properties and then walking away. So it makes sure that people that are making an offer on a property or making a contract or signing a contract on a property are serious about that property. So if they do walk away,
they will be bound by that fee.
There's a fee that they have to pay. So it just stops people signing multiple contracts.
So in New South Wales, when does the calling off period actually start?
Yeah, good question, Nicola, because this does vary in each state. So in New South Wales, once the contract has been entered by the purchaser and the vendor, the 5-day calling off period starts.
Okay, so the exchange between the two parties.
Correct. Yep. So let's go into Victoria now, for example, and we'll show you what the differences there are. So in Victoria, their calling off period is 3 full working days, as opposed to 5. They also have a fee of 0.25% if you do walk away and you do call
for the
off.
same reason.
For the same reason. So you're not signing multiple contracts on properties. But the difference with Victoria and New South Wales is the time that period starts is when you as the purchaser signs a contract. So the vendor doesn't have to sign the contract yet. If you sign the contract as a purchaser, the calling off period starts from that day.
So there are different trigger periods between
Correct.
each state.
Yep. So that's very important to note that, because as we go down the list of different states, you'll see every state is slightly different. So in summary, New South Wales is 5 days calling off.
Comparison to Victoria, which is 3.
With that time period starting when both parties sign the contract. So you as a purchaser and the vendor as a vendor signing a contract. In Victoria, it's 3 days calling off, but that 3 days starts when you sign the contract to make your offer, or when you sign the purchase contract without the vendor having to sign that. So what that means is, let's just say you sign a contract on a Monday. So you've signed a contract to purchase that property on a Monday.
The calling off period's meant to finish on the
So you've got 1 full day, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So let's just say the person you're buying the property from signs the contract on the Wednesday. You pretty much don't have any time after they've accepted your offer to call off. So you've got to be aware that the calling off starts from when you sign that contract.
That's in Victoria.
That's in Victoria, yep. And this is where you can put clauses in the contract to protect yourself as well. So you might, we talked about, the previous episode was about building inspections.
Yeah.
You might put a clause in there
subject
to building inspection, because then it gives you more time. Well, then it means that you've got a condition in there. If the building inspection doesn't come in like you wanted it to come in, you can pull out of that contract with no fees at all. So unless you're in WA, if you do get a building inspection and there are issues, the vendor has the right to rectify those issues. So they've got to be given the option to fix up those problems. For example, let's just say there's a leak in the bathroom. The vendor's got the option to fix up that problem, and you just can't walk away.
So back to Victoria, there's a 3 days cooling off period.
Yep.
And then it's triggered by the time I sign the contract.
Correct.
Doesn't have to be signed by the vendor.
Correct.
And there's a 0.25% forfeit fee.
0.25%, like we said before, $700,000 property.
$1,750
correct
fee.
So, yep. So now let's look at Queensland, Nicola. So Queensland is very similar to New South Wales.
Yeah.
So they've also got a 5-day calling off period. and that starts from when both the purchaser and the vendor
Sign
have
the
signed the contract. So it's like the same as New South Wales. And they've also got a 0.25% fee if you just decide to call off and walk away from that contract. So New South Wales and
identical
Queensland
to New South Wales
are the same, yes. So the next state is South Australia. So in South Australia, we have 2 days cooling off period. But the time that's...
So significantly less compared to...
It's less,
yeah.
but it's a little bit different again. So in South Australia, once a contract gets signed, so you sign a contract as a purchaser, the vendor accepts your offer as a vendor, then there's a document called the Form 1s, which is pretty much an information pack about the property. It gives you title searches, any easements, any encumbrances, any information about that property comes out in form of the Form 1s.
In the cooling off period or before?
They can serve that those Form 1s can be served after the contract is signed.
Okay.
If the real estate is organised, they'll have the contract signed and serve the Form 1 straight away. The cooling off period will start once the Form 1s are served.
Okay. So you could sign the contract and then not receive the Form 1s till 3 days later, and that's when the cooling off period starts.
Correct, yep. So and also keep in mind that's 2 full working days. So let's just say that the Form 1s get served on a Friday.
The Saturday and Sunday don't count.
Saturday and Sunday don't count, so it's not until the end of Monday that cooling off will finish. So you've got Friday, Saturday, Sunday and Monday. And that's the same in every state with a time period, so it's always the working days.
So as the purchaser, you kind of want the real estate agent to not be organised. But as the vendor, you obviously want them to be in place as soon as the contract is signed.
Correct, yep.
So in South Australia, there's no forfeit fee?
Correct, Nicola. So there's no forfeit fee at all. So like the other states we just mentioned, there's a 0.25% fee if you do forfeit the contract and do walk away. In South Australia, there's no fee at all.
Why is that?
It's something that hasn't been implemented by our government.
And it's better for first home buyers, I guess?
It is, yeah. It just reduces your risk.
So let's go next with the Northern Territory. What's that all about and their cooling off period?
Yeah, so with the Northern Territory, their cooling off period is 4 working days. And it's at the time of when both the purchaser and the vendor have signed and exchanged contracts.
Okay, so same as New South Wales in the sense that, and Queensland, that they both need to sign the contract for
Correct.
it to start.
Yep. Okay, so now let's go to Tasmania, Nicola. So with Tasmania, it's a little bit more risky there in making offers on properties because they actually don't have a cooling off period at all.
That's a bit dangerous for a first home buyer.
Definitely. So when you are signing a contract, you have to be 100% sure
that you want the
property
house
is right for you. There's no option to pull out, and if you do pull out, you will lose your deposit. So in Tasmania, and also WA while we're there. So WA as well, no cooling off period at all. So you sign a contract, you can't get out of it at all.
So you said lose my deposit, as in lose the, say, $20,000 I put towards the house.
Well, the deposit is what you negotiate with the real estate, not the deposit you're putting towards the whole purchase.
Oh, okay.
So you might sign a contract with a $10,000 deposit, or you might sign a contract with a $50,000 deposit, depending on how much that property is. So you will, if you sign a contract, whatever you put in the contract, you will lose that deposit. If you do.
So that's almost like the forfeit fee.
Correct.
For Tasmania.
Yep. And WA. So that's where it's important now when you are signing contracts, you do put clauses in there to protect yourself, especially when you want to do a building inspection.
And when I'm doing making the clauses, who's going to help me to do that?
Well, that's where you can have a finance broker can guide you. As a first home buyer, they can guide you and tell you what to write on that contract.
Yeah.
Now, these are all cooling off periods when you are making offers on properties. When we're talking auctions are all, again, very different. So with auctions, at the fall of the hammer at the auction, it's pretty much unconditional. You pay a deposit and you can't call off. So calling off periods are only applied to when you do sign a contract and not when you're negotiating with a real estate agent, not when you're buying at an auction.
So would you recommend for a first home buyer to not buy a house at an auction, but rather?
Not necessarily. If they've got their finance in place, if they set their limit, and they
are certain
they want to buy that property, then definitely still buy at auction. But it is riskier. But make sure you have covered off on your building inspection. You've got your finance in place. You know what your limit is. You don't go above your limit because you can't go back to the bank after and say, "Oh, can I have an extra $20,000?" when they've set your limit at a certain figure. So you've got to make sure what your limit is. So auctions are dangerous, but if you're in control, and always remember you're in control,
and done your research before,
and do your research before. So it's important to know the rules and regulations on the state that you're living and where you're going to be buying, because every state is different. the finance broker you're using or the bank you're using should know the basic information, but it's also important to do your own research.
So this episode's been really informative, Dad. I didn't realise every state would differ so much, considering we're all in Australia.
Yeah, that's right, Nicola. So all those policies are all state-based, although in theory it probably should be national, but every policy and calling off rights are different in each state.
I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. I'm Nicola Keflianos, and I hope this episode gets you closer to buying your first home.